The recommendation is that the board of directors authorize the general manager to enter into a contract with KPFF Consulting Engineers for on-call multi-discipline design services. This gives us the mechanism to design federally funded projects. We don't currently have that. And with electrification projects and future building, we'd like to have the mechanism to acquire federal funding. We've isolated the generator and the electrical design, the North Lot development and Fish Passage culvert design, the design and construction plans for paint and body booth, Moab remodel design. We have a lot of big lifts in the coming years that we'd like to potentially use federal funding for.
I believe we have already used KPFF on other occasions. And this is really in order to qualify for using the federal program. So it's a federal requirement that we arrange this.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. We had to follow federal procurement rules in order to have them on an on-call service.
Board members.
I'll move approval.
I'll second it.
Motion on the table to authorize the general manager to enter into a contract for consulting engineers not to exceed $500,000, but of course, all those would need to be budgeted expenses anyway. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, that motion passes. The next item is consideration of waiving the general manager's formal performance evaluation in 2023. According to our rules, the general manager is required to submit an annual report. We'll be hearing that later. But in addition to that, that's an opportunity for the board to conduct a formal evaluation of the general manager. I talked with some members, certainly not a quorum of members, and it was felt that maybe next year would be a good timing interval for a more formal review. And so I'm asking the board if they agree that we should waive a formal review. Certainly I will give Les an opportunity for some less formal evaluation, but to skip any kind of formal evaluation this year. That's my proposal. I'd like to hear from other board members.
I don't know, but I'll move approval.
For a second, I didn't hear one.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? So what I'm hoping is that we'll have a more informal sit down with Les. I'll be reaching out to each of you if you want to join me in that informal sit down. No pressure. If no one shows up, I think we'll take that as relatively good news, but I certainly think Les deserves whatever feedback he can get. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Oh, Chet Paul, please.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Sorry being late. After this performance evaluation, would there be a report issued, put in his file? Like, what would be the process?
Sorry, I don't in my mouth. I'm sorry, what will happen if we do not do the formal review?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that if you do this, not the formal review, but you said you will have some interview in a relaxed manner or sit down with the general manager and talk to him. I'm just saying, would there be a report at the end of that interview, or not interview really? So
no, I would propose that it just be entirely a verbal exchange.
That's all. I just wanted to ask this question.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, just one thing that I appreciate.
Are you allowed to speak to this item?
I know. I'm very cautious.
Yeah, so for this last year, not just myself, but Vice Chair Ali Hawkinson has also been meeting with Seth. So, I mean, we try to provide feedback to Seth on an ongoing basis. And I'm sorry, Les. Sorry. I'm trying to provide Seth with feedback on an ongoing basis.
Les listens better than Seth.
I'm sorry, let's move this along, please. Is any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of waiving the formal evaluation for the year 2023, signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, that motion
Michael,
passed.
Michael,
miss
I
an
have
item?
my, Michael, I have my formal review in 5 days and 12 hours.
Yeah.
Point taken.
It'll be a big report in the papers.
I call that a formal evaluation. The next item is consideration approval of the expenditures for the first half of October.
I'll move approval.
Second.
All those in favor of approving the expenditures signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? That passed unanimously. We now go into reports of the board. This is the meat of our meeting. We're going to have a presentation on the 2024 draft budget, and then we'll be hearing about the general manager from the general manager's annual report. So, Ms. Shipman.
Hi, thank you. I did email out this report yesterday. I think it was yesterday. There's a few minor changes that I'll point out as we go along. And thank you, Josh, for helping me out with the slides. So let's go to the next slide. We'll start out with just talking about our mission, which I know you're all familiar with. But our goal is to develop the budget to resource to the mission statement. And then our mission statement is going to be supported by the following values. But again, our mission is delivering safe, reliable, efficient, friendly transportation, environmental, sound transportation solutions, innovation, and partnering with our community. And then the strategic values that support this are the 3 E's, the equity, environment, and efficiency, which went into our 2040 plan. Connecting people to opportunities, which we talked about with our teams yesterday, our all-employee forum. So that's really the heart of WTA. Continuing focus on safety, the real and perceived safety concerns in the system. Improving the transportation ecosystem, developing our employees, and protecting our financial sustainability. So the budget will support these, and I'll point out specific line items where we've increased funds to address these. With our budget intent, we want to use it as a strategic implementation tool. So we have our high-level strategies and values, and then the budget will support those from a numerical thing. Oh, can you slow that down a little bit? Thank you. There we go. That's great. We want to align our resources with the policy and strategy and maintain our financial sustainability, which what that means for our definition is sustain our core services, ensure we can withstand economic instability, such as through the pandemic and unanticipated expenses, pay our bills timely, and position WTA responsibly for the future. Next slide. The strategic priorities, we have a number of them, and a lot of this is what you heard at our last board meeting from Les. I'm just going to lay that foundation again, and then we'll dive into the numbers some more. Ensuring safety and security of both our riders and our employees, maintaining the state of good repair, strategic planning for the future, investing in our people, including riders and employees. And ways we're doing this is we have a mentorship program for our employees, and we do a lot of educational trainings, improving the ADA access to the bus stops, and partnering to improve our transportation network. And one example of that is the Transit Access Fund. Innovatively addressing environmental and other challenges, and improving resiliency, including the cybersecurity. And then our desired outcomes for the budget are demonstrating our value to the community. And this talks about the transportation ecosystem. And there's a number of ways that we want to do that. Accessibility and mobility, supporting economic development, improving environmental outcomes. And again, we have some specific things in the budget that we'll talk about that directly affect these. So our priority actions, and some of these are things we've done in 2023, so I'll kind of talk about that also. Working on our due diligence for the transit-oriented development at Bellingham Station. In 2023, we completed a visioning partnership program with many community members within Whatcom County, and we've got some ideas of what we would like to see. We'll continue to move forward with that on what's really feasible out of that design. The transit-supported development at Linden Station. We have an architect right now looking at a site feasibility plan. We've determined it is feasible, so our plan would be with budget approval to do an RFQ in 2024 for a developer. Improving the bus stops and shelters. We have a program with City of Bellingham to levy some of the transportation dollars to do that. Safety, we have our TSO program that we launched in July. It's been very successful. We've heard a lot back from both our riders and our employees that they appreciate that. Identifying a rapid transit locally preferred alternative. So we had the rapid bus transit study completed this year. And next year we'll be working with the consultants to help us develop the preferred alternative for Bellingham and Whatcom County. And then that program will stage out over the future if approved. And then making transit easier to use with partnerships. So we continued our partnership with Smart Trips, and we actually have a different grant program with them where they're a sub-recipient of funds coming from WTA. That's a new situation for us. We haven't had sub-recipients before, so we're learning also. And then we're continuing the TAF program. So we have the two programs two awards we granted this year. They're not complete yet, so we will roll those over to next year, and then we'll be looking for new applications for the TAF funds for 2024. Ooh, a lot of actions. Okay, I'll keep going on this. Studying the feasibility of on-demand service. So that's our Linden Hub, and we've got a public hearing on that November 16th. To talk about how the Linden Hub continues potentially in Linden, but also is it replicable in other communities? That was one piece of what the grant wanted us to try and look at. Maintain our assets in state of good repair. That's replacing our vehicles at the end of life, looking at retrofitting Moab, developing the North Lot. You'll see some of those in the budget. Looking how we can address our long-term carbon footprint. So one idea we have in the budget is to purchase old growth forest and offset through the Whatcom County Million Trees program and offset our carbon offset output by purchasing trees. So trying to think little innovatively and differently on how we can do that. And develop a long-term financing plan. What this will do is allow WTA to bring on a financial advisor to help us identify the gaps between our revenue, our expenses, and the projects we want to do, and help us think about how we stage out programs. Are there other revenue sources we can look at, different ways to control our expenditures? So a lot of different ideas to really set us up to move strategically into the future. So when we met with Michael and Allie last week, they asked us to talk about the time that we spend in the budget and where our focuses really are. And we came up with 4 of them. We spent a lot of time talking about our priority actions and our outcomes and how to achieve those strategic objectives. A lot of time was spent on the projections of revenue, expenses, and cash balances. So there's some new charts you'll see, and we're trying to look at that differently. Looking at our correct mix of new and additional positions to catch up from past years and then establish us being able to move forward. And then looking at what the right and executable level of capital projects are. So trying to rein in our ambitiousness and really look at what can we execute internally with staff, supply chain demands, manufacturer challenges. So we're not reaching too far. And if we find that we're in a point where we could take on more, we'd come back to the board and ask for a budget amendment. All right, so now we're going to dive into the numbers. Are there any questions on that foundational right now? Okay. All right, so the first thing we have is talking about the new positions that we've requested in the budget. There's 6 of them, and that takes us up to 319 full-time equivalents. And the new positions are really primarily to catch us up from the past. So traditionally, WTA really focused on positions that supported the front line. And I think last year you saw some new positions that came in to kind of support the back end. And this is a little bit of a mix. So we have 2 in operations, a dispatch systems coordinator and a dispatch manager. So that helps the folks that are coordinating our schedules, getting employees on the right routes. 2 in fleet and facilities, a new hostler, and a new hostler supervisor. So the hostler group will break off from the section supervisor and have their own potential supervisor, and that person will really be responsible for the EV charging, the cleaning and fueling buses. 1 new public records position. Our public records requests have gone up over 350%, and they're becoming more complex. So we're looking for someone to support that. And then an additional information technology technician to help us better utilize our systems, be able to focus more on different systems and identify and keep us compliant with our cybersecurity. Yeah, Scott.
So we're adding 6 new positions, but we really haven't expanded service over the past couple of years. I guess, how sustainable is that? I mean, that's 2% increase in staff roughly. Can't do that forever. Are we just catching up, or is it? Because we can.
I think we're just catching up. So we really worked hard on identifying what the gaps were and where we were struggling. So this would be a catch up. And I think what you'll see next year in the budget as we work on some of those projects, we talk about what do we really need to execute those projects. So for example, if we do bus rapid transit, do we need a project manager for that project? And they may be contracted, they may be employees, but I think we'll be looking at more specific positions to execute specific projects. Not that these types of positions will go away, but I think our focus might change a little bit. Yeah.
Point of clarification.
Oh, hi, Tim.
Have expanded service, the Linden Hawk is one, and then the second one is the paratransit service up in Birch Bay Plains, and they're targeted some significant increases.
All right, thanks.
Okay, next slide. So now we're going to dive into the draft income statement. There's a lot of numbers here, so I'm just going to try and focus on things that have changed or are a little bit different. So fair revenue, we have that budgeted at a little over 13% over 2022. Ridership is recovering. Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think as of the third week of October, we were at 81% of 2019, 82%. So we're getting there. Paratransit, I believe, is there or expanded from 2022. Sales tax revenue is still really strong. We came in at, I think we're at 7% above budget for the year. August receipts were a little bit lower. They were only about 1.5% above last year. But what we budgeted is let's see if I can explain this. So every month when the receipts come in, we do a projection of what the year-end receipts will be. We've budgeted 4% off of that number. So it changes as receipts come in, but it won't be changing any longer. So we're looking at least 4% above where we will end budget. So we could be 10 to 12% above 2023 numbers. We're seeing retail and accommodation, construction. Retail dropped a little bit in August, but we still have really strong sales tax, just like we did through the pandemic. We're looking at the operating grants. So those are primarily the Move Ahead Washington Transit Support Grants, and that amount doubled for this next biennium. We're using that primarily to support paratransit operations, but we are also looking at where else can we use those dollars. And then interest income, and rates are really high. We're expecting 3.75% in 2024, and these are our funds that are invested through the Whatcom County Treasurer in the local government investment pool. And we're expecting those to be 3.5% in 2025. So a nice source of revenue there. Any questions on revenues?
Board members, I can't see you, so maybe just unmute yourself if you want to ask anything.
Okay, we'll go into expenses. Salaries and wages, we're looking at, oh, sorry, Josh, not that slide yet.
Right, it's
That
auto
uploaded
advancing.
this morning.
Yeah.
Up 8.3% from this year, and that's comprised of a 3% general wage increase for all employees. And then we have many new employees who are still working through the step process, and that's a 5% increase per year. What we did differently on wages and benefits this year is instead of budgeting for all positions to be full all year, which often resulted in us being way underspent in the budget, we looked at how many positions are traditionally open in a year, and we budgeted to that number. So for example, instead of 319, we budgeted for 310. I don't have the specific numbers. We're thinking that is a better way to budget and is more realistic. Again, if and when we get to full employment, we need to come back to the board for additional. Outside services, this is where we'll start to see some of those projects come in line. That's gone up almost $3.5 million. And that is to support the impacts of our priority action. So we have increased consulting help, such as legal, to help with the housing development in Linden, the BTS visioning. We have a lot of money in planning and design for Moab, the North Lot, and Midway. We have dollars for the locally preferred alternatives. So we're really trying to put the dollars in the budget to support these actions and strategies that we talked about. Utilities are up due to cost increases, and also our use of utilities is changing as we bring more electric vehicles on site. Yes.
In the future, will it be possible to kind of lump together fuel and the portion of the utilities which is due to charging electric buses? Like, can we estimate it's 10% of our electrical bill or 35%? Would it be, in the future, it seems to me it might be significant to divide up
I see
utilities.
what you're saying. I'll look into that.
Okay.
Okay. Insurance costs are up over 14%. A couple reasons. We had an appraisal in 2023, so the values of our facilities have gone up, but also the insurance market is just really tough these days with all the natural disasters that are occurring. That's just rippling through, and it's harder to find carriers that will insure. We get our insurance through the state insurance pool, so we're grouped in with 25 other transits in the state. We're all experiencing the same thing, and they worked really hard to get us insurance. Cybersecurity is a big piece that we're looking at. Josh and his team have a lot of things we need to do in order to, be able to qualify and get cyber insurance. So that's just going to be a changing market, mostly out of our control. All right, let's go. Let's stay on this slide for a minute. So capital expenditures, we'll go into this detail in a little bit. That's significantly above the 2023 budget, mostly because we had a lot of projects that rolled over. We had many bus orders that didn't come through this year. We have like 4 bus orders we're expecting next year. The hybrid bus costs went up. They're now almost the same cost as an electric bus. And then we have many state of good repair projects that are in there. We need to upgrade our elevator. We're putting in additional fall protection in the shop. But we do also have a number of grants that will support those projects. But that bottom line, you see that 14.8 million is the expected out of pocket or WTA local funds if we complete all of those projects. So we're looking at the net loss roughly equaling a cash loss of about $13.8 million.
So Shonda, and under capital expenditures, the budget was a little over 15 million. The projected actual is closer to 5.8 million. So that's just under 10 million is what's rolled over.
Correct.
So of the 41 million for next year, about 10 of that is rolled over.
That is correct.
Thank you.
And I can break that down also. Okay, next slide. So this is a new slide. This is not in your packet. I was a bit technically challenged last night. This is a summary of changes from the last reading to this reading. So the first column is where we started, and then the middle column are the changes. So it's the increase in the sales tax from the last reading, the interest income, and then the changes in the capital projects. And what happened with capital projects is we had a new quote on the hybrid buses that I put in there, and then the land acquisition costs. I neglected to have that in the first reading. And then the grant revenues is just the increased FTA reimbursement on the hybrid buses. So we have an additional, a little less than $2 million additional loss that's going on the income statement. And I will do another one of those for the reading on November 16th, although I'm hoping we won't have any more changes. All right, next slide, please. All right, this is a new graph that we put in after talking with Michael and Ellie and trying to have one graph tell kind of a few different stories. So this is historic and projected revenue, expenses, and reserves. So the purple block is our total reserves, which is made up of our operating reserve, which is required by the state auditors as 25% of your budgeted expenses operating. We have our capital reserve and our fleet reserve. Those two are board designated, and we have policies that support those. The black dotted line is our operating reserve. So that's the one we're required to have. We can't go below that. Revenue is the blue dotted line and expenses are the red. So over the years, you've seen that revenue often outpaces expenses. And we've seen many different charts where it looks like we're going to fall off the cliff in 5 years and there's this worst case scenario, and that doesn't often happen because we were budgeting very conservatively. What we're seeing as we go forward, big increases in revenue, those are when the COVID dollars came in in 21 and 22. And then as we move into 26 through 29, revenue and expenses become quite equal, and expenses are starting to outpace revenue. If I take this out further, that gap would get bigger. That's where the financing plan will help us, is what do we do with that gap? How do we execute these projects we want to do within WTA 2040 with the revenue expense we currently have? So does that look like, we don't have a lot of levers to pull. Revenue is at, what do we do something with sales tax? Do we try to increase sales tax? Do we look at that? Can we do bond financing? Can we phase our projects more so our cash, we have cash flow to support those projects? That's where this firm will help us do that. And then if we discover a new and different way that we want to do revenue, for example, bond issue, we will bring on a firm that will help us do something like that. Transits do that. It's common. You can do sales tax, secured bond funding, but that will be the things that we'll be looking at going forward in the future. Any questions on that?
So between 25 and 29, what is the annual growth rate of your expenses and income, roughly?
I would have to go back and look. Can I send that to you? It varies by year.
Okay. It looks fairly solid.
I don't have that anymore. Okay, next is capital. So hopefully you'll be able to read this on your slide pretty well, but this is our listing of the capital projects. The items in orange are what we describe as mandatory. And the definition of that is we either have a contract in place, we have grant funding, or we already are in the middle of that project and we plan to finish it. The blue are, I guess, what I would call discretionary. They're not a have to do, and we can make those choices. But this is what we've got planned out for the year. And you can see most of the oranges at the top are buses and vehicles, such as we want to replace some of our rideshare vehicles, and then a couple technology things, the Cordata, finishing that electric vehicle charging, and then the automatic passenger counters on the bus. So $41 million, again, if all of this gets completed. Any questions on capital?
Remind me the property acquisition.
That is property that we're looking at to potentially move BTS. Unless, I'm not sure if you want to say anything else about that.
Yeah, at this point, we're looking at one of the things that the BTS visioning showed was that it's too small to do things. So we're looking at other locations.
All right. The next slide just shows the breakdown of capital expenses and then the local WTA dollars and capital grants. And we have grants to fund about 63.5% of those capital projects. And that does not mean that we won't continue to look for grants. That's just what we're planning on right now. So I don't have any grants in there that are not secured at this point. All right. And then we'll go into these new graphs that hopefully will tell a good and different story about our reserve funds. Okay, next slide, please. Next one, there we go. All right, so I've got a couple of different things here and I'll try my best to explain what they are. So this first one is our projected cash and reserve balances without any WTA 2040. And the only WTA 2040 projects I'm going to refer to here are the BTS visioning, the zero emission fleet and structure, and the rapid bus plan. So that is what we had in between now and 2030. So I've taken a small window there. What you can see is that our cash will continue to decline. The bar graphs are the three reserves. We can't go below the red. That is going to be our one, and it will adjust each year with operating expenses. So you can see if we just continue where we are, we're at about $25 million at the end of 2031.
You keep saying you can't go below the red, but the reason the red is there is if some tragic thing happens. So you can go below the red.
We
You
can.
don't want to.
We don't want to, and
we're supposed to drive this ship so we never get there.
if we're in the red, yes, I didn't say can't. We should not. We have some bigger problems if we're in the red, and we would be out of compliance with state auditor. So we could do that.
But reserves are there for reserves to use if you need it.
Thank you. All right, next slide. Okay, here we go. So this slide has the WTA projects that we have secured funding with. The only one is the BTS expansion and enhancement. So the initial cost estimate on that is a little over $11 million, and we have a $5 million grant from WashUp. That again doesn't mean we can't go out and get additional grants, but this is if we did that project with the funding now, that takes us down to about $20.4 million. Next one. All right, so these are a couple of different scenarios. And the graph is kind of fun to do, and we'll see if it conveys what I'm trying to do. So we have 4 different scenarios here. We have our forecast, which is just our budgeted forecast, the best case, the secured grant, awarded grant scenario, and the worst case scenario. So forecasted doesn't include WTA 2040 or any of those related grant funds. It's like if we just continued where we are right now, it doesn't include enhanced service, increased miles, or additional employees. Like if we just stayed here and moved forward through the years. The best case scenario is if we did the BTS expansion, the zero emission infrastructure, and the rapid bus line, and received 80% grant funding. So that would take us to $4 million. If nothing else changed, we just did those things. No additional revenue, and we didn't cut expenses anywhere.
So I guess best case really also means most ambitious case.
Correct.
The greatest expansion, the greatest new projects.
Correct.
Thank you.
That we've costed out so far. That doesn't bring us down below our required reserve levels.
I guess I would say it's best from a service and operational perspective rather than say best from a financial perspective.
Yes, it's not best for the financial. Yes. The secured, the green line includes just the BTS expansion and that $5 million grant. And then the worst case scenario, which we wouldn't do, it's just for a visual, is if we did those 3 projects with no additional funding, with the revenue sources that we have now. So we have quite a range. And what we're hoping this will allow the board to do as we move forward is help us figure out how we want to phase those projects or make decisions. Which one is your priority? If we can get another grant for BTS, do we move BTS forward and the rapid bus line takes a back seat? However, with both those projects, all 3 of them actually, we've included the cost really in 1 year, where I think in reality they would be phased out. We just don't have enough information to do that phasing of costing yet. I think the locally preferred alternative for the rapid study will help us with that. We've been looking at alternative fuels, and maybe that is a way to lower our carbon output and slow down the pace of going to electric buses. So we're trying to look at different ways to achieve our goals that maybe not require a huge capital output. Any questions on this round?
Can we go ahead and stop sharing the screen? I think that's the last substantive.
Yep. Just the next steps we have are we'll do the public hearing on the November 16th. Potentially ask for board approval if we don't have a lot of public comments, if the board is happy. If not, we'll be back on the 7th. That would be our last day to approve the budget. That's it.
Thank you, Sean. I'd like to open up for the discussion for the board for anything you've heard. And we'll be having a public hearing on this at our next meeting. Can we go to the second of the stacked graphs? I want to echo Scott's point. The point behind those reserves is to be a buffer. If we try to buffer our buffer, that's kind of a misunderstanding what it's for. Nonetheless, the fleet reserve is the stack that you put on the top that disappears, so to speak, as that line drops. That I assume that's not because our actual that's because our fleet reserve would go away. If our reserves go down according to this, the fleet reserve would go away. Wouldn't it be the case more that we would try to shrink kind of every category reserve? It wouldn't just hit one reserve. It would hit them all.
What this is depicting is I have projections for fleet replacements through 2029. So I don't know what we would need in a reserve going forward. We haven't forecasted that far out, but you are correct. If we were in this position we would be looking at all of our different projects. So our capital reserve could go down, our fleet reserve could go down. We could flatten out or push out our replacements. So this is based really on just the information I have right now.
What I guess I'm saying is that there could be another set of stacked bars underneath here about where we want our reserves to be. And if the blue line actually went below the top of that desired stack, then that's a problem. This almost looks like we're able to shrink our needs to fit what's left, as opposed to some point where the stack should be taller than it is. See what I'm saying?
I see, the stacks should be taller. Than
We're
what
gonna
is seen
need
on
some
here.
green in
We
2023,
are.
2031.
So I'll need to work
The
with,
stack should be higher than the line.
so I'll need to work with my colleagues on what those requirements will be going forward, and we can create that, and then we can see really where our cash would be and how we need to allocate. So does that mean we run our buses longer? We purchase few in future years to kind of be able to have cash to do all of it?
Right. If there's a problem 5 years out, I think the graph should show the problem.
So I guess related to that, the blue is operating cash, but we don't have an operating cash requirement. Do we?
We have, this is based on our requirement from our people's line of credit, which is we have to have $10 million.
Over and above the orange.
Correct.
Which that could be a policy decision that we get rid of the line of credit.
Yeah.
And
We
then
don't
we
have
could
that, so that-
reallocate that 10 million
Sure.
to other
So,
policies.
so the blue line the blue bar could go down and it could turn green.
Yeah, I guess, Shonda, would it make sense to, I know you asked to reorder the colors, to put the green stack as the next one on the bottom? So you'd have orange and green on the bottom. And the reason why I would put them on the bottom is that those are the ones which we would work hardest to not sacrifice. So in the graph, you might show that the blue is on the top is the one that gets squeezed, that we don't actually squeeze our fleet reserve because we need to protect our fleet reserve as much as our operating reserve.
So what's interesting to me is the fleet reserve covers the fleet and the operating cash covers the fleet. Because the operating line of credit is to cover the fleet. So they're both covering the same thing. Do you follow that, Michael?
We can access that line of credit to pay for those
Right.
buses.
They're both fleet related.
Now, we could do this, so I could take these bars and pull what we could access through the line out, and then this reserve is a smaller number.
What the graph should show is if and when that blue line gets too low, where does it actually do the harm? Where would we actually need to do the cutting? It seems to me we wouldn't cut into the green bar first, that we would try to protect that. We'd cut into something else first. We don't have to fix the graph for this, but I've just, in terms of thinking what WTA would actually do and what we'd actually protect, if 5 years out, nothing changes and it looks like a squeeze is coming, what would we actually do?
Okay, I'll work on trying to revise this, and I'll work with Andy's group on, see if we can do that forecast out further based on our current fleet.
And I guess I was a big proponent of the line of credit, but seeing how it works, that we have to have a $10 million reserve. The line of credit really doesn't do anything for us.
And we usually get our FTA money within 3 business days.
So maybe the purpose
writing a
of-
check, we'll draw the money.
Having the line of credit probably doesn't do what I thought it would do.
It probably,
Agree.
it inhibits our ability
Yeah,
to
yeah.
use that $10 million.
Exactly.
So the line of credit is making us artificially inflate our reserves for a rainy day that's
Probably never gonna happen.
probably have enough umbrellas already.
And that renewal, I believe, is up next year.
Next year,
So we'll be
yeah.
bring that to you. And I think we talked about that when we renewed it, right? We renewed it and then thought,
Yeah, I think we just renewed it for a year because we weren't really sure.
correct.
You have my permission
And we
to go against what I previously said.
But the purple capital reserve, is this really indicating it's impossible for us to have a capital reserve? We don't want a capital reserve?
Nope, these are again, just the projections that I have to date. So we don't have capital projected out further.
I think I'd like to talk to you about redoing this graph, but I don't think the board needs to hear that.
Okay.
Board members, on the budget presentation, not just the reserves, but everything else, is any further discussion at this point? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Shauna, for that presentation. We'll go on to the next item, which is, I believe, the general manager's annual report.
Yes, sir. So the just overall introduction, as you see, it's a great lead in with the budget, so you can see the state of WTA from a financial standpoint. We are sound financially and have capacity thanks to those reserves and COVID funds to operate innovatively into the future. There will be challenges. We do have a big appetite of things in WTA 2040 to work on, and so that's the point of the financial plan, is to help us figure out how we can afford sequence gaps, those kinds of things, and where we need to focus energy to do those things. But the 23 report really is looking backwards. The budget and forecasting was looking forward. So I will state that I think looking back on this year, just writ large in the transit industry, there's a lot of changing expectations from federal, state, local, public on what transit's role is. You look at what FTA has put out, the state with youth ride free and specific budgetary language this year about low barrier or no barrier youth ride free. The push on transit friendly housing and accessibility issues and those things. It really, transit's going through, I think, writ large, kind of a transformation, which, to the board's credit, you were out ahead of that by a few years, saying, okay, WTA, you need to think about transforming. And so I think the budget, as you look forward, and WTA 2040 shows how we're doing that. So looking back, I think this was a good year. As we look back on things, recognizing that this is there's still 2 more months technically left, which is something that I noticed in the report should be in September. We've slid it to November. It may even be better in December when there's a fuller year to look back on. But with that, this year was a lot of the year of the study, as we talked about. There was in no particular order, the BRT feasibility. There was cross-county paratransit, BTS, Bellingham Station downtown visioning. When I say BRT, rapid transit, the sustainability plan, zero emission fleets, transition, and then microtransit has started and will go into next year. As you recall, back at the beginning of the year, we adopted the 2023 work plan. That's way too small. There was a bigger handout there, but what I'll do is I take each of these slides and then try to break it down into green and yellow. Fortunately, there's no red, which is always something that I look at as that's good, obviously, because we're progressing, but it's also, did we stretch and see? So there's kind of both aspects of that. So what I'll focus on as we go through mainly is the yellow. Oh, okay. Because I thought maybe I screwed it up. It was going. You can see on the green where things are going. One of the things I did struggle with, quite honestly, is between the green and the yellow are ongoing things. Is that green or is that yellow? Because it's not technically not complete, but it's progressing well, is what I ultimately came to that conclusion on. So I wanted to focus on the yellow because that's where some things are slowing us up, but still progressing. So on the offering environmentally sound transportation, yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, somehow I think when they got sent, it reordered. But looking at the environmentally safe or environmentally sound transportation choices, The yellow in there is about completing installation of the electric charging stations at Cordata Station and here at Midway. Reason behind that, at Cordata, there is issues with PSE working on those things. The city, we're doing this in partnership with them, and they have some review issues and some things that they're going on and redesign and those kinds of things. As you know, things just go slower. And so, but that is moving forward. And then Midway, that's a four-phased kind of, right? 4 phases? 3 phases. Three phases. 4 sounds better. So 3 phases. Yeah. Part of what's slowing that down is we have to do a National Environmental Policy Act review of that has to be approved by FTA, and that process just takes a while to move through. So that's slowing that up a little bit. Well, Devin looked at me like a lot of it, but nevertheless, keep pushing through on that one. Next one should be okay. Delivering safe, reliable, efficient, friendly service. There are a couple things on state of good repair on this one. The bus shelter, ADA, a lot of that is supply chain things and purchasing issues, just going back out, having to get people that could do this, get them in a timely manner to do that. So it's slowing things down on that. Our Moab campus improvements, we do need to expand here. But part of the things we're doing on that is trying to figure out what's the best way to do that, particularly if we expand with Bellingham Station. Are there ways so we're not duplicating expansion efforts and things? So trying to look at that, which has slowed us down a little bit on how we're looking at things. We do need to keep moving that forward. I'll pause there to see if the subject matter experts have anything they want to add to that. You don't have to. Just
Moving forward. Yeah, that's some process.
Yeah. Looking at the innovative transportation solutions on that, the on-demand feasibility study that is going into next year. That's the one that looks at can it scale out into other areas? So expanding what that would look like. How do you do that in an effective, efficient manner? Is it worth doing? There's a number of things that it'll look at, including what is the reason for microtransit to get out, about reaching the last mile, providing accessibility. It's not really about ridership. It's more about those other components of things. But obviously it can come at an expensive cost. So looking at those things, and are there other ways of doing it and so forth, and looking at can it be expanded out into the county. We put finalizing the countywide radio system interlocal. We're not ready to finalize that. City and county have some issues they're trying to work through as from an administrative standpoint on how we work through that. Nevertheless, from a technical standpoint, the parties are working on one of those things that we can be doing now, like a repeater out in Sumas, looking at the radio system, how we do roaming and things so the underlying purpose of this is how do we make a better radio system across the county that shares. So still working towards that. The interlocal itself has some issues to work through with the parties, particularly from the administration of the system. Because as you remember, the idea was that we create this, the 3 parties would create this system, and then other agencies would subscribe to it, including school districts, park departments, ultimately to law enforcement, fire, and those things, and then they would pay a monthly fee. So there's an admin component to that we need to continue to work through. But from a technological standpoint, Josh is leading a good effort there. Anything you want to add? Okay. Let's see, moving towards improving our partnering aspects of things. Strategic communication planning, it's underway and it has begun, but it's a thing that we want to expand on, and we haven't expanded far enough yet because many of the things we've been talking about on this year, the study, are the kind of the elements that we do a lot of outreach on. So we need to nail those down a little bit, but we are getting to that point where we're going to be ready to go out and for the board members will want to work with you about seeing if you'd be willing to have us on your agenda, hear from you all. So that's continuing. The greater partnering with local governments on transportation planning, that as the board had authorized is a position to focus on those elements. That's we've got that position out for advertisement now, and with the comp plans coming up next year, that's a great way to really increase that. And that's looking at how do we cooperatively work on setting the conditions for transportation success. So things like how does land use and parking and zoning and all those things all align together with what the community wants to advance from a transit standpoint. So that'll be an ongoing continuation thing, but I think the comp plan provided a good opportunity for us to have those discussions. Partnering with local jurisdictions and developers on transit supportive land use and developments. That's not looking at the Linden Park Ride, for example, things. That's looking at greater, are there those opportunities out there to do that? That's, we don't necessarily lead and control that because it's really a development and a local community thing. However, again, with this land use planner, we're hoping that we can get more lines of communication going. Many times WTA tends to be on the back end of development, that things are happening, and then we find out and try to see if we open better lines of communication. Well, I think we have good lines of communication, but having resourcing, I guess I would say, somebody who can help and be there more frequently at the outset of it. And then organizationally, I think we talked about on the financial sustainability side of it. One of the things that we had hoped to do was a more robust economic impact assessment due to just time, quite honestly. Scale that back, working with the American Public Transportation Association. They have an economic impact analysis tool that we're working with on them to take a look at things. What is WTA's impact to the community from things like buying fuel, from employees, from the purchasing things that we do, the economic development support of supplying transportation for essential workers, all those kinds of things. There's an economic impact that comes with that. So that's ongoing, and trying to work with the APTA folks to do that, and then see if that gives us what we need, or do we need to expand to do a more robust from there. And then the last one on implementing a remote work policy. We have one, but we're trying to still assess and see what happens. There's just the literature's all over the place on what works, and then what works for a transit agency as well as a whole different layer on top of that. It's not an architectural firm or accounting or something of that nature, which may lend itself a little more to remote. So we're trying to work through that, and we've really kind of just stepped back a little bit. If Vanessa, you can hop into if you want, but kind of taking a step back, kind of seeing what's going on, and then as we all know, the environment on that is changing, and so trying to see whether that's really a need before we really jump into that. Like I said, we have one that we are using, but see. So with that, I will stop and take questions, comments, concerns.
Board members, that was the annual report from our general manager.
Was that document sent out?
No, I thought so, but no, I guess Michael's shaking his head. No.
Go ahead and send that out.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's go on to the next item, which is mission statement update. The topic for today is service. Mr. Frazier.
There's no chance I can get this done in 3 minutes, but I'll make it the fastest 7 minutes in transit if possible. So as everybody knows, our mission bullet number 1 is to enhance our community by delivering safe, reliable, efficient, and friendly service. And to that end, I want to highlight a few of the efforts and accomplishments in each of those areas. starting with safety. We've talked about it, but we launched our Transit Safety Officer Program in July, and we've had very, very positive early returns. For context, we have 4 staff working over the course of all 7 days that we have vehicles in the field. And they are dedicated to field safety by building relationships with passengers through riding buses, performing patrols, and responding to passenger-related issues throughout the system. They're addressing agitated passengers, illicit activities, behavioral issues, vandalism, medical events, and such. They're also an additional resource to support transit questions, route navigation, stranded passengers. They're just an additional, how can we help? How can we make it safe resource for the agency? They've been documenting their interactions, and just for context, they're averaging over 33 documented interactions per week, in addition to just the presence value that they're adding. So far, they're really adding a lot of value. I want to highlight that 2 of our expediters, Andrew Butcher and Kevin Goldsberry, are going to be recognized in December as part of, by the Red Cross as part of their Real Heroes program, for their efforts in responding to a medical emergency that happened at the Cordata station, and from my perspective, likely saving somebody's life in that situation. We have had 26 total preventable accidents and incidents so far this year, which matches the amount that we had in 2022. Of those, 6 of those were categorized as major. For context, that is anything that results in an injury or is over $4,000 total damage. Most common event that we have is right side striking on a fixed route bus, mirror clips and such. I also want to give a big thanks to Fleet. They finished the fixed route air conditioning retrofit project this summer. And importantly, what that'll allow us to do is next summer launch a full AC fleet in those days where we're in heat operations to protect our operators and our passengers. It gets very hot on a bus when it's above 80, 85 degrees. Moving on to reliability, this year we've been focusing on catching up on our transit operator work group staffing. We started 2023 7 operators below our budgeted allocated FTE count. And we have been hiring and putting our maximum throughput through training this entire year. To that end, we have trained and released 21 new operators into service this year, and we currently have 9 additional in training, all of whom have passed their CDLs this week, so we're very excited about this group. They will be released in December. We have, on top of that, however, we have had 25 operator departures this year, and so you can see the challenge of trying to catch up. But 8 of those have been due to internal promotion, so we're always excited to see folks in that situation. I also want to just give a huge shout out to our entire operations staff, working additional hours, long days to cover work and limit the amount of service that we've had to cancel. We have had to cancel some fixed route service and some paratransit service, but it would be significantly worse if our staff wasn't putting in a lot of long hours. Efficient. We get into some numbers. We've talked about some of these, so I'll cruise through these real quick. In September and October, our fixed route ridership averaged 83.5% of our pre-pandemic ridership. That's up from between 65 and 70% this time last year. So we are increasing. We'll get more detail into numbers as the year ends. Paratransit ridership is also up from last year, but has not had the same growth that fixed route has. We're at 78% of pre-pandemic ridership. Last year, we were at 71%. Our passenger per revenue hour has increased this year in paratransit from 2022, but only slightly. The changes that we made to service in June had both a positive and a negative impact on passenger per revenue. Overall net, it dropped just a little bit, primarily due to the increased paratransit corridor out in Blaine Birch Bay. That is a less efficient area to serve from a paratransit standpoint. And then finally, friendly. Just 2 days ago, WTA participated in the Downtown Trick or Treat event. We had an amazing creepy corn maze themed bus parked on our plaza. It was the easiest corn maze ever, though. You went in the door, down the corridor, and out. But theme-wise, it was brilliant. We had a steady line of families and kids from 1530 to 1800. Well over 500 folks had a touch point with us through that event, giving out candy, and it was great. Friendly is actually, it's hard to measure on some level, but we keep a comment tracker. We've had 183 compliments this year. Over the last year, we had 190 total. So we're doing great. Our staff are doing an amazing job out there. And I want to end this with a call back to our TSO program and highlight one of the comments that we got. And I'm going to read it because I have to. This is from a passenger. What impressed me was how well a transit security employee handled and de-escalated the situation verbally. The offending individual was loud, confrontational, and seemingly aggressive. And within only a couple of minutes, the unruly man begrudgingly walked off property without any need for physical altercation or involving the police. Just good verbal de-escalation techniques, authority, and not being intimidated by thuggish behavior. I don't need to tell you that employees like that are appreciated and highly valuable, not just to WTA, but their riders. I'm sure it's nice for them to hear every now and then. Thanks to you and your staff for a safe ride. That's why we do what we do, and I'm pretty proud of our staff for doing an amazing job.
I'd love to end the meeting right there, everyone. Is there any further business for the WTA Board of Directors? If not, Eric, thanks for taking us out. This meeting is adjourned.